Imagine the future that is where we are connected to each other and our planet in love and abundance. However that manifests for you, resonate it. Don't let these people control the creative force that is you by feeding you full of this crap that you then spit back out as pessimism and hatred and division. There is a whole different way of living, and we are on the cusp right now of finding that out. And Bernie, we're going to have to make a choice coming real soon here. Do you want to be part of Zuck and Musk's world, or do you want to be the world that is connected in with our divine planet and the larger universe?
And welcome back to Connecting with Coincidence. So glad to have you with us, talking about the stuff that mainstream science is still having trouble talking about. So we're going to talk at him and with him and with you about the paranormal with our guest who's knows a lot about paranormal stuff, but this guy is a dreamy guy, man. He's a dreamy guy. He loves talking about dreams because he's the dream guy. He is the author, J.M. Debord, living in sunny Tucson, Arizona, as the author of numerous books about dream interpretations, the founder of Owl's School of Dreaming, and a community moderator at reddit.com r/dreams. He's been quoted as a subject matter expert in major publications like the Boston Globe, the Guardian, and New York Magazine. Find him online at JM Debord, Debord, JMDEBORD.com. And we'll be talking about dreams. So welcome back to Connecting with Coincidence, JM. Glad to have you.
Thank you, Bernie, and thank you for the wonderful blurb. We call it a blurb for my book, The Science of the Paranormal. You might have trouble seeing this, but that's Bernie right there, what he had to say. And he was really attracted to the chapter on dreams. That there's 5 chapters in the book, and one of them is about all the research that's been done into dreams, which has a bit of a into synchronicity and precognition. It branches out to connect with those subjects too. So considering all that is covered in that book and our mutual interest in dreams and synchronicity, I think we're going to have a great conversation.
Good, and let us begin. One of the most famous conversations that took place in the history of the paranormal and more is Jung's collaboration with Wolfgang Pauli. Did their conversation actually answer questions about psi that we're still asking today, such as how it works and why?
I think they answered these questions 50, 60 years ago when they did their collaboration. A little bit of background. Wolfgang Pauli is the quantum physicist, won a Nobel Prize, very well known as one of the shining geniuses in physics of his day. He went to Jung for psychoanalysis, and Jung said, I want to have you go talk to one of my students' proteges. I want to have you do psychoanalysis with them because you and I are going to collaborate. And it ended up turning into a 20-year collaboration where their stated goal was to unite physics with psychology. And this, I think they found the answers that we're looking for, because what's been missing from the science of the paranormal are the models that help to explain how it works. We look for these cause-effect relationships in science, and it wasn't, we still to this day have difficulty creating working theories and tests that can be falsified and things like that. So so the short answer is yes, they did. They came up with the theory that called the dual aspect monad. It wasn't a new theory. This is an ancient philosophy. It probably goes all the way back to Hermeticism, which is our most ancient form of philosophy / religion. And so you have one of the great minds of psychology, one of the great minds of physics. They have a 20-year collaboration with each other. And in the end, what they say is that mind and matter are dual aspects of the same underlying source called the monad. some people would call it God, but we strip some of that language out of it because God implies like a religious connotation for a lot of people, or an all-knowing creator. What they say is that there is an underlying source that is this undivided wholeness. We call it God, they call it the monad. Over here, you have psyche, which is the totality of the mind. There's an individual psyche and there's also a collective psyche. When psyche comes into contact with monad, this undivided source, it splits into mind and matter. So mind and matter are dual aspects of the same thing. And what Jung said was that if you go to the bottom of the mind, and you know through his active imagination technique and what he chronicled in the Red Book about his explorations of the unconscious, is he went about as far down into the roots of the mind as any human being ever has. And what he found is that when you drop into the bottom of the mind, you end up in the world of matter. So we think of mind and matter as split from each other, as very different things. There's what you experience as mind, as mental, as your awareness of yourself and the world. And then you have the world out there. So the world in here, the world out there. They say that they're the same. Fundamentally, they are coming from the same source. They are dual aspects of the same source. So yes, Bertie, they did come up with what I think is the explanation, or at least the best working theory, because if you begin from there, you can start to explain things like telepathy. If you and I are dual aspects of the same source, should it be any surprise that you might be able to pick up what I'm thinking and I might be able to pick up what you're thinking? They shouldn't be a surprise. If mind and matter are dual aspects of the same thing, then a psi phenomena such as clairvoyance or remote viewing, it shouldn't be such a big surprise that this is a capability within the human repertoire, because this is, you're talking about viewing a remote location through your mind without going there, without looking at it on a video chat, without on a live webcam. No, I can put my mind anywhere in the world and see what is going on there in real time. I can see what's happened in the past. I can see what's going to happen in the future. This is a capability that is within the human repertoire, and it's because mind and matter are dual aspects of the same source. I can use my mind to go into the world of matter and interact with it in a way that seems paranormal, but I think it's actually normal. But we just don't understand exactly how it works. But we do, because Pauli and Jung mapped all this out and explained how it worked and presented it to the world. Well, the part about presenting it to the world is where it gets a little bit tough, because you have to go into the letters they wrote to each other. There's a book called Adam. I want to say Adam and Archetype. Oh gosh, it was one of the sources that I used for my book in the science of the paranormal. And it's basically, it's the collection of the letters that these two wrote back and forth between each other, where they explained what they were working on. On Bernie was your favorite subject. They were working on the theory of synchronicity and going back and forth with each other, proposing ideas, writing letters back and forth, and then working on the theory. They did that for 20 years. What they presented to the world was the theory of synchronicity. But if you go into their letters, you'll see that what they discussed, it was actually much broader than that.
The way it was basic synchronicity, which I think is very broad anyway, and includes a lot of paranormal events, is mind and matter. Because synchronicity is where ontology meets epistemology.
Yeah, I like that. Yes.
It's a fun
Um,
phrase. It's a fun phrase, but it's where how we know things meet what's real out there, because we don't know what's real. And when we have a synchronicity event, we connect our minds with our environment, and that begins to suggest our minds are embedded in our environment. And
yes.
Jung and Pauli went to the unus mundus, another name for what you're talking about, And I'm just an old football player, trying to put my cleats in the ground and saying, well, I'm going to do that stepwise and use synchronicity as a way of understanding the broader reality in a kind of sequence rather than going out to the whole idea of the unus mundus, because I'm not sure what that is, although a lot of people have a lot of confidence in what that is. But the question I want to ask you, Jason or JM, is like, you do dreams. You traveled with Jung and Pauli into the collective unconscious, and you moderate a dream segment on Reddit. So what I am curious about, and we started to talk about, is collective dreaming. That people will come up with on their own because they're part of a collective mind, some of the same symbols that other people are coming up with. And this becomes a way of looking at global synchronicities. And I'm wondering what you think about that.
I've seen too, we've talked about this a little bit at the forum. This is r/dreams. So reddit.com/R/dreams. It's the most popular place online anywhere in the world to share dreams. Our traffic numbers are incredible. Um, so we get people from all over the world who come to share their dreams and to talk with people about subjects related to dreams and about specific dreams and subjects related to dreams. And we've talked about uh, if there are symbols that come up out of the collective that you can then see in the content that is shared at Reddit, at the Dreams Forum. And I think that I think that we could find something there over time if you had the right tools for sifting through all of that content. I know the National Dream Center has done something. They use r/dreams as one of their sources, and what his is like a keyword. Is his is a word search. He goes through. He uses like a web crawler, and it hits these spots where people share dreams, and it pulls words out of there that are, and it looks for the prevalence of those words. So on this day, if airplane crash comes up 50 times, and but the average is 10 times, you could see that as sort of like a spike, and you would suggest that somehow that idea is coming forward in the collective unconscious or collective consciousness, depending on how you define it. um,
That's just what I'm talking about, and thank you for that example. And I wonder if you can give us some other examples. There could be the sinking of the Titanic and 9/11 as examples, where people had dreams before each of those catastrophes took place. Uh, those are fairly well known.
yes.
Uh, just even the book about the Titan um, sinking was 15 years before the Titanic sunk, and this book predicted, without knowing it, that what was going to happen uh, in the Titanic itself by describing very similar events uh, in the book. So there are ways that people know things, and what you're doing is tuning into dreams as a way of knowing, as a way of knowing. And I'm wondering what
Hmm.
examples, like the airplane crash word you just gave us, what other examples might you be able to offer us?
you know when there are it's kind of hard sometimes to differentiate, because when world events happen that are getting into the collective consciousness, it will be reflected in dream content. So is it coming before or after is hard to tell. So for example, when Russia invaded the Ukraine, the numbers of dreams reporting war with Russia, now picking up on that, and like, not just conventional warfare, but like bombs, nuclear missiles are incoming, and the people be having these dreams they're living in America or Europe or something, and you know Russia has launched a surprise nuclear attack, and everybody's hugging each other and saying goodbye because they're about to get incinerated. So there was an uptick in those types of dreams that appeared at the dreams forum. So there are those reflections of things after the fact, But then I've also had ones where there were natural disasters that were very clearly seen beforehand in dreams, and they're posted with a timestamp. So we know that it wasn't someone after the fact coming along saying that, oh, I had this dream about. One guy we worked with, it was an earthquake in South America, and he reported it that he had this dream, and it was ahead of time. And then we were talking about, dude, your dream was like, it was right on. It was like, he even had it down to the town that where it happened, or the region where it happened. He knew that part of South America. And I was like, well, do you live down there? He's like, no, I don't live down there. I'm like, well, what is it? It turned out that that was where his ancestors were from. That region that got hit by the earthquake. He's like, I have family, not too many generations back. They all lived in that part of the world. And, my nuclear family migrated from there, and we've lived somewhere else now, but I have a connection to that part of the world. So he clearly dreamed about it ahead of time. In my book, I don't talk about those things as much because I was only able to find the research that suggests that there people can dream about these things in a collective sort of way. But what we do have very clearly is the work of the Global Consciousness Project out of the Pear Lab at Princeton, where they used the random number generators to show these wild deviations from the norm when there were big events, globally impacting events that happened ahead of time, such as 9/11. The about 4 hours before the first plane hit, the numbers, the deviation from the norm started going way off the charts. And Dean Radin and Roger Nelson have done some great work on this. So we do have a way of measuring what is happening in the global consciousness through the Global Consciousness Project. The dreams part of it is a little more, because there's so much subjectivity to dreams. I think that it would have to be designed in a way that's very clever to be able to weed out could potentially be things that muddy the stream.
Yeah, confounding variables, including newspaper reports or even hearing possibilities beforehand. So they could be dreaming about something that they kind of heard about having happened. And there are other variables too that have to be excluded. But what might be the benefit, JM, of using dreams rather than the Pear Lab random number generator?
I would say, first of all, it would be a longer lead time to whatever the event is. Like, let's say that it's the alien invasion. you know um, Although that is a common dream theme, so it would be hard to
Well,
but having a longer lead time to an event that's going to happen, if you could pick it up through the people dreaming precognitively about it, could have a longer lead time than you would through the Global Consciousness Project, because it tends to pick up things as or just before they
yeah,
happen.
yeah,
So
right.
9/11, the funeral of Princess Diana,
Yeah,
um, global events that people tune into and stir the emotions. Because the emotional part of it is very important, because the research into psi phenomena, various types of, we call it paranormal, but psi phenomena, various types, is that there is an emotional component that seems to be it's sort of like what strikes the tuning fork and starts it resonating. There has to be that initial strike to make it to resonate, and
that's
that's what the emotional component of it. So whatever happens that would be seen ahead of time in dreams would have to be something that resonates emotionally on a mass level for it to be picked up ahead of time. If you've ever had Julia Mossbridge on your show, I'm pretty sure you know who Julia is, the
yes, I
neuroscientist.
do. I do.
She has a wonderful explanation for how this works. It's an analogy. She says that if you're watching water flowing along say in a creek, and there's a big rock coming up in the creek, that the water, before it gets to the rock, it's going to affect the way that the water flows.
Yeah.
So if you do not know the rock is there, you can watch the flow of the water and infer that the rock is coming up because of the way that the water flow changes.
That's
She
beautiful.
says that
That's beautiful.
time flows the same way. When there is a big event coming up in the river of time, the where we are in the present, time might start flowing differently because of that big rock coming up. So if there's a big event coming up in the future that's going to impact us personally or globally, then I think that you start to feel it ahead of time. And it shows in dreams, premonitions, and maybe even in synchronicities. Because Bernie, you think that synchronicity is sort of the umbrella under
I,
which a lot of these paranormal phenomena like telekinesis, clairvoyance, remote viewing, that it all relates back to synchronicity. And I'd like to hear you say more about that because I listened to the episode and I was waiting for you to, you know, divulge the goods. So maybe this is a chance for you to, if you want to, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I was real curious what you think about how synchronicity relates to these other phenomena.
it's the same idea that Jung and Pauli were talking about, where mind and matter begin to come together. And it's kind of a coming together of that moment of weird stuff, according to this reality, starting to happen, where we begin to notice that mind and matter, that you, we're not different from what's around us in the way we think we are. We're both individual and we're both part of something larger. And that something larger allows us to make connections when we're open to it. So emotion is a very important part of it. Of most synchronicities, you have to have an emotion usually to drive it, since they
Mm.
take place often during transitions, life crises, challenges, and need. That tends to increase synchronicities. And those, what are those? What is synchronicity? Just even the story of you talking with someone behind the counter, a salesperson, and finding her interesting to be able to talk with, and then being very interested in her name because you'd recognized it before. Uh, and it turned out that this person that you hadn't seen in 5 years was your cousin.
And only
That
met her once before then. Yes.
so you didn't know that, and I think of that as of getting to be where you need to be without knowing how you got there. That we have
Yes.
a human GPS capacity that allows us to find interesting things in our environment, kind of like
Yes.
radar.
Yes.
And kind of scan the environment to see what's out there, and we can pick it up. And it's just funny how that happens. And it's not cognitive; it's something else. It's what we use the
It's
word intuition.
resonance. Yeah, or
Resonant,
intuition, but it's resonance. You're finding you can actually feel it in your nervous system and it will lead you to where you need to be. I've found lost items that way by thinking in terms like if I were my wife's keys, where would I be? Because my wife has lost her keys. It doesn't work every time, but if I'm able to get into the zone, I can just start letting my feet start walking. And sometimes I'll find those keys in the weirdest place. Like you would never think, well, why, how did the keys end up here on a shelf in the garage? Oh, she was pulling groceries out of the car and she needed a place, so she put her keys to the side and then she came into the house. Well, we would never think to go there. And I just let my feet move to get there, which is
beautiful.
sort of what happened with my cousin Shelly. My
That,
friend Mike, okay, so 18 years old, I'm wandering the mall with my friend Mike, and he decides he wants to go to Chess King, which is this clothing store. This is my synchronicity story, by the way, folks. And I walk in with Mike, and because he said that there were these two really cute sales girls that were working there, and he wanted to go mac on them, right? We're flirting, hitting on them. And so I'm talking to the one sales girl, and I'm just trying to make conversation, but I'm like, oh my gosh, is she cute? Like, oh, she's got the look that just really resonates with me. Well, it turned out she was my cousin. Okay, so I didn't know this though. I'd met my cousin Shelly once after her father died. 5 years before then, we were both 13 years old. And so now it's 5 years later, and I'm talking to the sales girl, and her little name badge says Shelly. And I'm like, oh, Shelly. I'm like, cool name. I'm like, I have a cousin named Shelly. And she goes, is your mom named Bonnie? I'm like, yeah, my mom's Bonnie. She's like, that's my aunt. you're my cousin. And I'm like, oh God, thank goodness I didn't, because I was about to start, I was hitting on the girl. So it did, and the way it was like the universe led me to that place
Not the
so
u-
that I
not
could
the not
reunite
the
with my,
not the universe, JM, not the universe. And at least I can
the,
do that with you. A lot of
yes,
people use the universe as a placeholder for
yes,
explanation, and it's not an explanation. It's a placeholder, meaning that it covers over something that we don't
oh
really
yeah,
understand. And the universe was not doing that then, in my view. You were resonating, and the term resonate is so vital to synchronicity that
yes,
you get two patterns that are similar that somehow resonate with each other and draw the person to the pattern that is resonating in their own mind, because the external pattern resonated with your internal pattern. And your
yes,
friend may have picked it up too, because you're not we're not separate. When you're with a friend, you form a collective mind to some degree. Some person that you know well is and your mind are connected. And
yes.
he was looking too for somebody to be able to have a conversation with. So the two of you met Shelley. So I prefer resonating. That is the tuning fork, the tuning forks that vibrate with each other as fundamental to understanding synchronicity.
Yes. Yeah, if you strike a tuning fork, and this is just to give background for the listeners who might be wondering what in the world we're talking about, I can have, let's say, a tuned to 440A. I can have a tuning fork over here that's just sitting there, hasn't been touched. Over here, I have also a tuning fork tuned to 440A, and I tinking, and I hit the tuning fork. The other tuning fork will start resonating even though it hasn't been struck with the same, and they've done these experiments that are really wild in the way that they can show that objects will start resonating with each other. It relates a little bit to the experiments with cymatics too, the way that you can make a certain sound frequency and put sand on top of a resonating drum head, basically, and it will form these wonderful looking mandala patterns or other types of patterns, but they often strike me as mandalas, which suggests that there is some type of underlying form to all of this, and that resonance is how the form comes together. One of the things that as I was exploring the science of the paranormal, I was looking for published research because there's a lot of people who say that this is science and that's science, and I have to be able to stick with, well, what do we agree with is science. So I was looking into the published research. And one of the things that I found that I thought was really fascinating is that when we consider to be the most fundamental particles of life, the particles that make up atoms, so we get down and you have your protons and electrons and neutrons and all that stuff, right? Well, we think of them as particles, and the way that we've modeled this is like, well, you've got the core of the atom and the electrons are spinning around it, and we can count the number of electrons and do all that. It turns out that's not it at all. What's happening is that those particles are taking shape based off of something that is in the underlying quantum fabric of reality, and they think of those as fields. So quantum field theory is the kind of the latest iteration of this. The particles are taking shape according to what the field tells them to do, or like there's it's like the blueprint is out here somewhere, and what we experience is sort of the building or iteration of that. And David Bohm, the famous, now he's a famous physicist. What a lot of people don't know is that he was ridden out of the field of physics by Oppenheimer because he proposed ideas that went against the physics of the time. But he proposed something called the implicate and the explicate order. The implicate, if you want to make it really simple, is the blueprint. The explicate is the building that's built from it. Physical reality is the explicate. The implicate is in the quantum field. So everything that takes shape in our reality is actually being created by this blueprint or being formed by this blueprint, which is another thing that Jung and Pauli came up with in their collaboration, which I think is so fascinating, is that in between mind and matter, you have what, Bernie? Archetypes. And the archetypes in this sense are like a mutable interface between mind and matter. If you take into the level, you've got mind here, matter, dual aspects of the same underlying source. What is the mutable interface? In other words, changeable, mutable interface between the two. That would be the world of the archetypes, which we access through mind, but have an independent reality of their own, according to Jung and I suppose Pauli too, because I learned about this through their collaboration. So what it means is that if archetypes are also the original form, archetypes give form to things that are in the mind. In the same sort of way, the quantum field gives form to things that are in matter. We are coming much closer, since we can understand how both sides take shape. Psyche and mind take shape over here, influenced by archetypes, underlying patterns and forms of thought, behavior, emotion, etc. Over here, we have something that is we're able to say, well, this is how matter is taking form. There is an implicate order or blueprint for everything that takes shape as matter, which, by the way, can take shape and then just disappear as it wants to, because these, at the particle level, these things come together temporarily and then they go back into the quantum field. Where can we find that middle ground? And I think it's the human being. I think the human being is this interface between what is a universal sort of consciousness or mind and this world of matter. And you have the human being in that middle ground experiencing all this through our inner being. And if you access your inner being, you can find that you can actually influence the world around you through your resonance with the world. I think healing works this way with people who are gifted healers. They can resonate with the person that they're with, that they're trying to help. They might have specific modalities that they employ, but what really is causing the healing is the transfer through resonance from the healer to the person that wants to be healed or is seeking healing. And so the I think that we have the answers here if the people would be brave enough to explore these things. I think that we could explain it rationally and with the language of science. Except there's one problem with the language, the way that science approaches these things. And do you know what that is, Bernie? There's probably a lot of problems you can think of, but the one that I'm thinking of is that the scientific method was not designed for studying phenomena that is non-material in nature. And we keep trying to pound that square peg into a round hole because we're trying to make phenomena of psyche and mind fit into a materialist paradigm. We're trying to say, for example, that consciousness originates through brain function. Do you think that consciousness originates through brain function? Most neuroscientists think so.
Well,
But
we don't need to do that horse right now.
okay.
I think we both agree, and many of the people watching this, that there's something more to consciousness, whatever we mean by that, than the brain. And my problem is more, what do we mean by consciousness, not so much as whether it comes out of the brain or not, because synchronicity shows that our consciousness, our awareness, our capacity to be aware of things is broader than what our brain looks like it can do. And there's a lot of good science trying to do this. And the problem with science now is that really is the basic science is asking questions. And you ask questions about anomalous experiences so you can find out what's behind them. So it's more the bias against looking at stuff that's outside the religion of science that, for me, is the current problem. But let's go to science. Go back to your book, The Science of Paranormal. Does your book, The Science of Paranormal,
Just so
Harry?
you people know the cover, the bent spoon right there, that's what will get your attention.
All
All right.
right, that's another.
My publisher pays me $5 every time I show the book cover on a podcast. So
Oh, good.
cha-ching,
You
five
get
dollars in my
five
pocket.
bucks. Okay, that's good.
I can buy a candy bar.
Does your book, The Science of
Uh,
Paranormal, suggest that humanity is nearing a scientific paradigm shift similar to Copernicus or Darwin? And if so, what changes when that shift occurs?
ooh, yeah. The Yeah, I would say yes, absolutely. And in fact, I think that the materialist way of approaching that we've used for the last 200 years is becoming something of an anachronism because of the what we call rational materialism is butting up against its limits. The what it can study and how it can study it. Um, and so I do think that it's butting up against its limits, and that the next frontier is going to be the people who are trained in both sides. So what I mean, you have people who there's a reason why we have rationality. There's a reason why we have the scientific method and logic. This is developed in human species for a reason. And in the particular, the last 200 years or so since the introduction of the scientific method has changed fundamentally the way that human beings organize and together on a mass scale and understand the world. But on the other side of it is the non-rational world that can only really be understood through experience. So what we have are people who are getting trained in the hard sciences who are then going into the non-rational through personal exploration and experience. They are getting trained in, say, transcendental meditation. They're getting trained in remote viewing. Someone like a Julia Mossbridge would be a perfect example. She's got a PhD in neuroscience, and she's also trained as a remote viewer. So which is basically the clairvoyance. So what we need are more people who can step into both worlds and accept both of them as being equally valid. And I think a lot of what we call paranormal now or supernatural is simply because we can't explain it with um, in a way that we can all agree
And
on.
in conventional scientific terms, and
Conventional
that's
scientific
and
terms.
that's been the big bugaboo about paranormal research. How do you explain it?
Yes.
Well, we don't have a way of explaining it very well. We have the Jung Pauli, unus mundus, dual aspect monism, and other ways of thinking about how reality operates. And
Yes.
I don't know, since we have a lot of dark matter and dark energy floating around us, and we don't know what that stuff is made of, we just know it's here. I'm
Yeah.
a I'm a I'm a believer in uncertainty. Uh, the Heisenberg uncertainty principle has something to do with my uncertainty. I don't know how to explain it. It's fun to try to do that. But the important thing is functional. What can what can we use from the paranormal, from a book like yours, The Science of
Mm.
Paranormal, if phenomena like synchronicity, telepathy, and non-local mind are eventually confirmed, let's look at that as a possibility, as real. How would that change what it means to be human, not just individually, but at the species level?
Oh, wow. For one, I think it would give us access to things that are and have been cut off from us. We used to be a much more intuitive species that had natural access to things that these are part of the natural world. Energy healing, for example, the spontaneous prediction about what's going to happen in the future. These are things that have been documented going back thousands of years. But unfortunately, at least in particular in the West, we went through this thing called the Inquisition that made these things go underground. In fact, we may have, if it's genetically based, we may have wiped out a very large swath of this in the population. Dean Radin's research has been showing, or at least the research he's been reporting, shows that in the West, they have this gene sequence that they've identified with people who have strong uh, demonstration of psi ability, PSI ability, basically psychic. he says that it's showing in the West, is particularly in places like Spain and France, where there was, in Italy, where there was a heavy inquisition, and they went after the people that did what? They called them witches, but these were the people who were the natural healers, who were the empaths, who were the intuitives. So we almost um, made this ability go extinct. And if it wasn't through the direct killing of the people and preventing the transmission of their genes, it was through the environment of fear that was created. And Bernie, I follow Jung's thinking on this and his theory of compensation, where if something that is a natural part of the psyche and is mostly is in the unconscious, if it is repressed the way that psi has, if it is repressed strongly, it's like a dam that is holding back the water. And when you remove the dam, which happens inevitably because too much pressure builds up behind it, what you're going to have is an outpouring of this. And I think that we're starting to experience that now. This, for centuries, we have repressed this side of the human experience, this capability that is built into the mind of everyone, by the way. Just some people have more natural aptitude at it, but anyone can do this stuff. When that opens, what we're going to find globally is that there's going to be a spontaneous eruption of paranormal phenomena. And I think it's going to manifest as what these people are saying, that they're calling down these spaceships and orbs and stuff. This is a much deeper subject than most people know. You have to go deep into it. But we now have organizations that have recognized that these things are real, that their people are having telepathic communication with what they call non-human intelligence. Right now, odds are that we're going to have the disclosure by the end of the year. I don't know if you've seen the betting markets on this, but there's a betting market on UFO disclosure coming from the White House, and it's just recently rocketed because of inside information that leaked, and people are going on these betting markets and saying that this is about to happen. What happens next is that people will find out that they can go sit in their backyard, drop into a state of meditation, connect to the above, and say, come on down, I'm ready. And it actually happens.
Well, that's
Something comes down from orbit and comes down. It's an orb, it's a spaceship, it's whatever. But people are having these contact experiences. And it's not just people wearing tinfoil hats anymore, Bernie. These are special forces operations groups that are doing this under controlled conditions, and many others. But so if you ask how this is going to change,
yeah, that's
it'll
what I'm
find
asking. That's what I'm asking.
it's gonna change is that people realize that this stuff is real, it's been repressed, and that you can access it through your own being. You don't have to have any special talent for it. Basically, if you can learn how to clear your mind or meditate, which is really not so much clearing the mind, it's just not getting distracted by the stream of thought. You can connect into the environment around you and realize that this is not a hard barrier. Inner, outer. This is not a hard
And
barrier. It's more like a cell wall.
that's what I'm saying about what synchronicity tells us in incremental ways. Synchronicity is a way to do just what you think the visitors might do for us. Unfortunately, I am finding pretty regularly that a lot of people don't like to change the way their minds work.
Yeah. Well, you
And,
figure out a way of operating
and
in the world, and now
that's
you're
what
being
you're going to
told the
keep.
world is much bigger.
Or yes, and so they're not going to like it, and they're going to resist it. And what I'm writing about
Yeah.
is that resistance. That's even when that happens. In the book Childhood's End, the overlords showed up, and humanity didn't change until the overlords directly intervened and stopped people from killing each other by killing the people who were doing the killing. So the
Yeah.
intervention isn't just showing up, it's being able to show right here to people living here that there's something else going on. And I'm just doing that with synchronicity. And we've got And you're going to talk about the visitors, and I still think it's not enough to do just show up and say, "Hey, we're here."
No.
There's got to be something else. And the paranormal, synchronicity being a name for a lot of paranormal events, is a way of showing there's something more going on here. So I have another question for you uh, about the future, uh, because it's not just other intelligence potentially showing up. We have an intelligence right here that's very
Yeah.
strange, that I think sometimes is being operated by another intelligence. I mean, it's only just my sense of it as I work with ChatGPT. So I ask you, could technologies like AI, brain computer interfaces, or global data networks eventually make phenomena like telepathy and synchronicity more visible or more suppressed?
Oh, wow. Um, okay, I've done some thinking on this subject, and maybe there's a synchronicity here.
Good, good.
Because we talk about this a lot at Reddit, at different forums, not just dreams, but like some of the paranormal and some of the science forums. Is AI actually ever going to be able to achieve some kind of singularity where it is able to artificial general intelligence, that it becomes self-aware at the level that human beings are? Could a machine or an AI ever do that? And I don't think so. But I think that there are people who are using this, and I know this because I'm also at the Jung sub. I'm a moderator at the Carl Jung subreddit too, and there are people who are designing AIs that are teaching people how to do things like active imagination, shadow work, in the work of individuation, which is all an unlocking of the deeper capacities of the human being.
Yes.
Um, and if the AI can do it, then it can help people in this. I am all for it. And there are people who are recognizing that there's this downside to AI, which it could lock you into this, illusory world of, image and sensation and idea, and people get completely lost in it. Some of these AI chatbots that have a sort of a romantic or sexual nature to them are just insidious in the way that people who are not well grounded in themselves and their lives are easily sucked into this, and they are no longer operating in what I would call reality. They're in a digital reality. But it could be used the other direction too by teaching people how to do these things that unlock their greater capacities, through working with the mind. But could the AI then be used as some part of a neural global network of the mind that is sort of a machine that is going to recreate what already exists that we know of as the collective unconscious? It would be through some kind of neurological implant, like what Elon Musk, he has I'll call it a wet dream of uniting everybody together with chips in their minds that can be controlled from a central location, um, which of course he would control. Him and Zuckerberg would be in their bunker controlling everybody's brains. But anyway, I digress.
Now, let's underline
Uh,
that the two of them and others do have bunkers, very large underground residents that are intended to be able to survive something terrible happening on Earth. So
which
that,
they say has been seen ahead of time, and it's coming up in 2026 or 2027. This has been acknowledged. It's not just those two, but these other tech titans. They have access to information that the public doesn't, and they say that the seers, the predictors, the palantirs. The Seeing Stone, which from Lord of the Rings, which is now a massive computer system that is run by Peter Thiel, the reptile. They That's an
yes,
anagram of
that's
his name,
right.
by the way.
That's
Um,
right.
and they're saying that this event is coming and that they're preparing for it. They think that the surface is going to go into chaos. There's going to be some type of a collapse of civilization, and then they're going to come out of their underground bunkers to reinstitute world order. But they have to be able to survive 6 months to a year
Let's be let's
without
let's be
access to
clear. Let's be
resources.
clear about what you're saying, because
Yeah.
we're talking about mind and matter interacting with each other. And when
Hmm.
these guys are telling you about the future, they're telling you not what's going to happen, but what they want to have happen,
Yes.
what they are helping to create happening. But if you
Yes.
believe their story, and that's the whole narrative dominance thing, there's so much fight for who's telling the story everyone will believe. And now you just told a story that's very convincing. These smart guys with all this power are telling us that they're going to be underground and they're going to come back and organize stuff. Well, that's an image you have described, JM, very clearly. And they do it very clearly themselves. So if you start buying into that narrative, then you're giving them control of the narrative. And what I am
Mm.
working on is a better narrative than that one.
I think that we hijack it. The way that and it relates back to your question with the AI, because I've been asking myself this too, and I recognize that our reality is being shaped by the narrative. This is very much like a dream in that way. A dream presents symbols in the context
Yes.
of a narrative, and it creates a reality that's completely believable. On our collective level, that also happens through the things that we believe to be true. If you go into the study of magic, you find out that the things that we call enchantment, we are actually creating the things that we're interacting with. This is all a phenomena of the psyche, and some of it is outlined in some of these projects where, in my book, I talk about a project where researchers created a completely fictional profile of, it was called Philip, and Philip had this background and all these things about him. And then they held seances to contact Philip. Philip was a fictional character that manifested as paranormal phenomena that happened to these researchers. Now, these weren't just people sitting around a seance table who were, Tom, Dick, and Harry. One of them was like the head of Mensa in Canada. Another one was an architect. Another one was a psychologist. Another one was a engineer. And had deep interest in the subject. And once they figured out that to create an atmosphere of play, this was important. They were all serious about it, and they were like, "Oh, Philip, come to us!" Oh, yeah, 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 and nothing was happening. And then when they were like, "Oh God, this is silly. Let's just sing a song about Philip and 99 Phillips on the wall, 99 Phillips on the wall," and they just start getting silly and having fun. And then weird things start happening. Tables are levitating and lights are flickering, and there was all this stuff. And they had seance contact with Philip, who repeated back to them like, "Philip, who are you, and what's your background?" And Philip gave them the information that was what they created in their fictional account of him. And then Bernie, it was replicated. Other groups picked up on this, created their own fictional characters, and then created them, and it manifested in the physical world as paranormal phenomena. So we have the capacity to be able to create things out of pure imagination. And yes, the way that the narrative right now is being spun is that the tech titan overlords know what the future is, and they're preparing for it, of some kind of global civilization collapse, and then a new world order arising out of that, where I would imagine that what they'll do is the first thing they'll go after are the people who intuitively know the truth, that these will be the first people to be weeded out, because they're scared of the truth. They're scared of people knowing the truth, because there is a way of knowing the truth without having, this has been done before by a remote viewer named Pat Price. He read the file names of the super secret programs of the NSA that were contained in one place, which was inside of a massive safe in a super secret NSA facility. He remote viewed it, and he read the file names that were on the folders. And the next day at Stanford Research Institute, where he was doing his research with Hal and Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ at the SRI remote viewing program, the next day national security showed up because they thought there'd been a high level leak, because nobody knew the names of those files. So what he proved, and has been proven many, many times since then and before then, is that there are ways of knowing the truth simply through your own mind. And so this leads back into answering your question. At least the way that I see it, Bernie, is that we have to have a different narrative to counter this dark vision of the future. Because what Zuck and Musk want is something that none of the rest of us want.
That's right.
They're talking about a techno-fascist authoritarian state
And what
where they
I'm
control you at a mind level by
and
implanting chips in your brain.
what 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 I'm trying to say here is what I'm working on is the new myth.
Well, count me in, because I what I see is an eruption of the human psyche that is the compensation for these things that have alienated us from the physical world, and
We're
that
coming to.
as the
I'm sorry,
borders come down,
we're coming
yeah,
to the end of our time together, and you've been very clear about what you're seeing has happened and currently is happening.
yes,
And what I'm interested in is what you have for your imagination. And you used a word that is a function of human beings that's being suppressed right now by
yes.
having all this TikTok-y stuff going on around us, social media. So we don't imagine. And I'm delighted, JM, that you came up with imagination, even though it's near the end of our conversation, because we need to imagine a new future. The title of my book is Therapy for Humanity, Imagining a New Future for Us. And we need more people who recognize what you recognize, but more than that, we need people who will imagine together about a new future for humanity in a different
Yes.
way, but still collectively, that Zuck and Musk and others are doing now.
Well, what I see it's happening is that there are people individually and collectively who are connecting with the living consciousness of the planet. They recognize that we are destroying our world through polluting it and other ways that we're abusing it, and that there is people who are wanting to go in completely the opposite direction. You know, these orbs and their crop circles and stuff like that, we call it non-human intelligence, and we think that it comes from the stars or way out there somewhere. It's not, Bernie.
It's
It's
us.
it's the consciousness of our planet. It's us in the new sphere, in the global consciousness that is the planet, and where we are manifesting these things. So
Yeah.
what we can imagine becomes real. And
Yeah.
there was a
Yeah.
guy at Laurentian University who, Professor Michael Persinger, who came up with this. Or at least he did a lot of research that showed that this is real, and we can imagine a world that then manifests. The
Yes.
the center of power or of influence that I'm seeing it collectively is through the recognition of what's been done to our planet and where it is heading as far as climate change, and people who are saying we can't let this happen this way.
We
We
can't.
have a capacity
We
for
don't have
connecting
to.
with
We don't
nature that
have
is,
to. We don't have to let it happen this way. I would say, not just can't. We don't have
yeah,
to, and we can imagine together. And we've come to the
yes.
end of our time together, and I'm glad we got to this imagination place. You have a wonderful background in understanding how we got here and what negative things are happening around us. It's your imagination and your dream work that I think can help show the future for humanity.
Thank you, Bernie. Whatever I can do to contribute. Imagine the future that is where we are connected to each other and our planet in love and abundance. However that manifests for you, resonate it. Don't let these people control the creative force that is you by feeding you full of this crap that you then spit back out as pessimism and hatred and division. There is a whole different way of living, and we are on the cusp right now of finding that out. And Bernie, we're going to have to make a choice coming real soon here. Do you want to be part of Zuck and Musk's world, or do you want to be the world that is connected in with our divine planet and the larger universe that is all one thing and
That's
with each other? in love and abundance. Which world do you want? And we're going to have to make that decision.
Yes, we do. Yes, we have to. Thank you very much, J.M. Debord.
Thank you,
Uh,
Bernie.
and thank you for your contribution to our world, the science of the paranormal. And it's great talking with you, and we'll keep in touch.
Great talking with you too. And the book is at all the retailers. It is published through a New York publisher, so it's gotten wide distribution. Great Christmas present, although, it's only 2 weeks till Christmas, so I don't know if anybody's going to hear this beforehand. But thank you very much, Bernie. I appreciate it. And
You're
that's
very,
another $5 for my publisher for mentioning my book again. Wait, I got to show the cover. Ding, 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 ding. Another $5. Yay. I kid. I'm kidding about
you're going to
that. But
find it
thank
under,
you.
you're going to find it under your pillow tonight. So that's all
Yes.
right.
I sleep on my book. I love this book. It was synchronicity that it came to me. This project that came to me, it was a synchronicity. And I know that's a subject for another time.
That's a
But
subject for another time.
yeah, thank you for having me on your show, Bertie.
Thank you very much for being with me.